Welcome back to the channel. A lot to unpack this week. A lot to talk about, especially around these tariffs. What is about to happen here in Canada if Donald Trump, president-elect, decides to put this 25% tariff on all goods entering the U.S. from Canada. And with that, we have a Liberal government right now eager to give Canadians a little bit of tax relief on that GST on certain items and cut everybody a check. How is that going to play out in the inflation saga here in Canada, as we saw inflation tick up to 2% just last month, and unpacking what this could mean for the potential rate cuts by the Bank of Canada as early as December 11th, and what it could mean for the future of the Bank of Canada moving into 2025. And with all these things taken into consideration and broadly looking at the Canadian economy, well, just to synthesize all that, doesn't look too promising if we get this bout of inflation that could be coming down the pipeline. So we'll take an opportunity and unpack our thoughts and opinions or sentiments this week on the channel. We invite you to subscribe. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date with everything that happens in the mortgage and real estate marketplace, as well as don't forget to leave those thoughts, questions, and concerns in the comment section below. Now, let's start talking about the tariffs. This is the big question right now that we heard on social media from Donald Trump just a few short days ago, talking about his plan on January 20th when he comes into office as the 47th president. One of his first measures is going to be to put a tariff on Canada and Mexico. And basically, he's not happy with the way Canada has operated their borders, and obviously drugs coming in from both Mexico and Canada into the US. Now, it's very important to understand the clout that Donald Trump has. I mean, whether you love him or you hate him, we cannot disagree that his plans, his tariffs, have moved needles, especially here in Canada, where we now have this frantic scramble for Team Canada to unite. Politicians from across the aisles need to sit down and figure out if Donald Trump and his administration on January 20th put into effect these tariffs, what are going to be the ramifications of that on the Canadian economy? I mean, that is the big question. For Canadians, this is where we need to look at our politicians and say, you know, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, you need to shake hands, sit down together, and figure out how we can avoid Donald Trump and his administration from putting this tariff into place. And, you know, Donald Trump, you have to give him some credit here. He's basically not even in power, and he's already shaping things up for the way he will govern the entire United States, the way he's going to basically rule the United States when it comes to his mission. Now, as we all know, Donald Trump was elected back in November. Earlier part of November, I mean, looking at the way things went down, he had a landslide victory based on what many Americans felt were super important. That was the border and the economy. They voted en masse for the economy and the border to be priorities. And Donald Trump is wasting no time to figure that out. And ultimately, with that being said, are these tariffs going to be a bluff? Are they actually going to come into effect? I mean, he is erratic. We cannot anticipate what will happen. We have to prepare. So we have to really understand how these potential tariffs are going to impact Canadians. They have an impact not only on Canadians who, as Canadians are fully aware, we do a lot of trade with the US, one of our biggest trading partner. I believe over 44% of our trade is with our neighbors to the south, and vice versa. The US does buy a lot of items like soft lumber and other items from Canada. Although it's not equal, we definitely have to really consider what this will do. Now, ultimately, even the US president-elect, president that's coming in, Donald Trump, has to understand that now that the US just recently this week had experienced a little bit higher bout of inflation as well. Is this going to have to limit his ability to put the tariff, or is he just going to use his muscles and the power of the US economy to flex and make Canada sort of understand that, hey, we mean business, or they mean business? And this is where the Canadian politicians, and to be honest, which I don't think Trudeau has the tenacity to stand up against a guy like Donald Trump. We need definitely some fresh blood in our government to withstand the barrage that Trump and his administration can put, the pressure on the Canadian economy. And we need someone who will actually stand up for Canadians and the Canadian economy, much like what Donald Trump will do for the US, basically bringing in new policies that is going to resurrect manufacturing and industry in the US. We need to see that happen here in Canada. And ultimately, when Canadians go to the poll at some point in 2025, we'll see what ends up happening there. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. But with all that, let's add some salt to the wound. I mean, honestly, many Canadians will feel that these little GST and breaks on potato chips and beer and Christmas trees is going to be beneficial, and it will for the short term. Remember, the government needs to generate tax revenue to pay the deficit. It is very simple. Canada doesn't have the money, doesn't generate enough money currently to cover the deficit when you have a government, a liberal government, that is happy to spend at any single moment in time. And with that taken into consideration, they want to mail out checks to millions of Canadians. That's going to cost them billions of dollars we don't have, and interest that we can't afford to pay with these current interest rates. Remember, just like Canadians pay a mortgage, they've experienced high interest rates. The government has also experienced these interest rates when they're paying back the deficit. And ultimately, when you have associations and powers like the IMF and the Bank of Canada itself warning, saying, hey, if you don't curb the spending, well, we will see inflation come up. And ultimately, when you give Canadians money, well, you're just taking it from their other end. Remember, that money that's coming out to Canadians isn't free. You're paying for it. You've already paid for it. You're just getting a check back for a small percentage of what you've already paid out. And I believe this is a tactic to potentially buy some votes. Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comment section below. And ultimately, as we look at the entire political landscape, I'll honestly, yes, being political, it's very difficult not to be, but when you have a government that's inflationary by nature, doesn't have the tenacity to stand up, I believe, to Donald Trump, well, it's a recipe for disaster. And if we don't see the Canadian economy expand, we don't see growth, we don't see these problems resolved right here at home, what chance do we have of building a stronger economy in the next few years? And hopefully a fresh set of administration, whether it be the Conservatives that enter into power, we hope that they can fix some of these problems or undo some of these problems in time. Now, with all that being said, we look at the inflation, we look at the Bank of Canada, we look at what course, what trajectory could the Bank of Canada be on right now? Ultimately, if you had to really guess, with inflation ticking up, the U.S. implementing potentially tariffs, it can go either of both ways, right? It can go one way or the other. Either we have a central bank that sees this as inflationary and pauses and cools down these rate cuts. Maybe we see a smaller rate cut, maybe even a pause in the next few months, maybe not in December, but maybe in 2025. And ultimately, we'll see how that plays out as we look at the exchange, right? We look at this inflation, these tariffs, if they do end up coming into power. The other thing is that the central bank will have to slash those rates in order to become more attractive to other global businesses, investment opportunities to build here in Canada in order to basically try and beat out the US as a place that is open for business here in Canada. So, ultimately, as the economy continues to weaken, the Bank of Canada has been thrown and lobbed a couple of curveballs here. The jury is out. Ultimately, I do believe that the Bank of Canada will cut in December, maybe a very small amount, like 0.25%. But what does that mean for the rest of 2025? There's 8 meetings scheduled for the following year. And ultimately, when Donald Trump gets into power, we'll have more insight. We'll have more insight as these events unfold after all these meetings take place. And they've determined here in Canada, Team Canada, how they're going to combat the Trump tariff, if they're going to actually retaliate or work to secure our borders and basically kibosh any of these potential issues, especially when you think about the amount of individuals that have crossed over from Canada, and not to mention that Canada has let in two splinter cells of terrorist organizations. And don't get it twisted, Donald Trump knows that that's happened under Trudeau's watch, and that's why they are very concerned with the Canadian border as well. I mean, we're not Mexico, but I mean, at the end of the day, nothing against Mexico, but we have to basically reinforce our borders if we want to salvage our economy and avoid those tariffs. So let me know your thoughts, your concerns in the comment section below. Let me hear from you. But until next week, thanks for stopping by and thanks for watching.